R. Kelly, the R&B singer, convicted of racketeering and sex trafficking charges after years of allegations that he used his fame and influence to prey and abuse minors. Prosecutors praising the bravery of his victims for testifying as Kelly now faces spending the rest of his life behind bars. ABC's Stephanie Ramos has more.
This morning, victims speaking out after decades of allegations against R. Kelly, the singer now convicted in federal court.
For 30 years, we were overlooked. For 30 years, people said we were lying. For 30 years, people said this didn't occur.
I feel like justice has been served.
Kelly convicted on 8 counts of sex trafficking and 1 count of racketeering charges. The 54-year-old singer possibly facing the rest of his life in prison for leading what prosecutors allege was a criminal enterprise consisting of himself and an entourage of individuals as the leader of the enterprise. Kelly used his fame to recruit women and girls to engage in illegal sexual activity. Gloria Allred represents several of Kelly's accusers.
He has only himself to blame for what he did. He underestimated the courage of his victims.
50 witnesses took the stand over the course of Kelly's 6-week trial. The prosecution alleging Kelly had encounters with 6 women, including the late singer Aaliyah, who Kelly secretly married in 1994 when she was 15 and he was 27. The marriage was later annulled. Aaliyah died 7 years later in a plane crash.
Guilty verdict forever brands R. Kelly as a predator who used his fame and fortune to prey on the young, the vulnerable, and the voiceless.
Lawyers for Kelly, who pleaded not guilty, said the relationships were consensual, suggesting the accusers were jilted lovers and fangirls trying to cash in.
Of course, Mr. Kelly is disappointed. He was not anticipating this verdict.
R. Kelly is scheduled to be sentenced in May of next year. He faces a mandatory minimum of 10 years behind bars and up to life in prison. Kira.
All right, Stephanie Ramos for us, thank you so much. Well, host and legal analyst at the Law and Crime Network, Terri Austin, was with me for the breaking news coverage yesterday and joins me once again with more on the impact of this verdict. Terri, so great to have you with us again. Kelly was convicted on the second day of deliberations. We talked about this after years of heart-wrenching allegations, but he was acquitted in 2008. So what do you think made this decision so quick compared to the others?
You're right. 9 hours was really fast over the course of 2 days. And this jury, which was, 7 men and women and 5 women, they actually looked at all of that evidence and went through it with a fine-tooth comb and came to a relatively quick decision about his guilt. I think the prosecution put on an excellent case, and the jury believed all of the stories, which were quite consistent, except for a couple of the underlying acts. And that doesn't mean that they didn't find them guilty of all counts, because they did. They found him guilty of the racketeering. They found him guilty of the 8 counts under the Mann Act. But they did find that there were 2 of the underlying acts related to Sandra that they didn't believe. But other than that, they came back with everything and thought the stories were consistent. The difference in the 2008 case, Kira, is the fact that there wasn't a witness to testify in that case. She decided not to take the stand. And there were tapes that, were trying to be shown in that, and it was difficult. It was very blurry to show that that was R. Kelly. It was a different time, so I think those are the major differences between the 2008 case and this case.
Right, and he was using those videos to intimidate his victims, blackmail his victims. He was forcing them to do this as a way to keep them silent, right?
That's exactly right. He actually used lots of different ways to make the witnesses not testify. He threatened them. He used his entourage. He had multiple settlements to try to keep some of these women quiet under non-disclosure agreements. And when that didn't work, he did threaten them. He threatened their families. And in fact, at one point, there were charges against him in terms of tampering with witnesses. So he absolutely did have a point of trying to scare his witnesses off. So that was also another major difference in the 2008 case. In this case, the witnesses were brave. You heard Gloria Allred talk about the fact that she was proud of the victims who she represented for actually testifying. It's not easy to get up on that stand to talk about things that are very embarrassing as far as the victims are concerned, but they did. And so that is also another major difference between then and now. And finally, the other difference, I think, is the fact that the Me Too movement has seen cases that have been successful. Obviously, the Harvey Weinstein case is front and center as far as that's concerned.
But as we pointed out yesterday, Terri, you know, Harvey Weinstein and, you know, these beautiful white actresses, and we know that this has been a criticism of the media and our culture for so many years, that you highlight, you know, the white woman and you forget about the black woman. And you pointed out yesterday, this is a huge moment in time for black women who have felt like their voices haven't been heard, and finally justice is coming forward for just horrific crimes that have been committed for so long.
That's exactly right. The research does show that young black women who make these accusations are generally not taken very serious. It's considered black on black crime. These women are considered stronger than other women, and they should be able to handle anyone who might be abusing them. And we've seen jurors actually come back and say that they did not believe young black women where they might have believed a victim who was Caucasian. So it is the first time we've seen something like this, where this industry, also the music industry, we have someone who is very powerful like R. Kelly, someone who got lots of awards, Grammys, etc. And it's a culture where you don't want to go against someone who is successful, someone who has been followed by everyone in the community. He was actually, after his indictment years ago, where he was ultimately acquitted, we saw him in church next to pastors and in front of young people. It's a culture where people wanted to have someone they could look up to. So it was sort of brushed under the rug for a while. So I think things have changed. People are looking at young women, young girls, young black girls, and believing what they have to say, understanding that they have a voice and they have rights as well.
Oh, it's about time, that's for sure. Finally, sentencing is in May for R. Kelly. He's also facing charges in other states, right? He's 54 years old. Looks like he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison.
It does seem as though he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, no doubt about it. Under the racketeering charge, that's up to 20 years. And we know there are 8 counts under the Mann Act, and that's 10 years each. So he could be facing dozens and dozens of years in prison, which would ultimately end up being virtually a life sentence. So he has that. And then in the Northern District of Illinois, he's facing some federal charges there. He's also facing some state charges for pornography, obstruction of justice, and there's also the Minnesota charges where he is facing prostitution with a 17-year-old. So no matter what, he is going to be facing jail time. And if he actually stands trial for these other cases, we know that they have possible sentences too, which will add on to what he will probably get when he's sentenced in May.
Well, it's taken far too long, but finally these victims are seeing some type of justice here. Legal analyst at Law and Crime Network, Terri Austin. Terri, thanks so much.
Thank you, Kira. I appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.